Hi, everyone. Pam Allen-LeBlanc here with Reiki from the Farm. I am so excited about our podcast this week. All through the holidays, I got messages about the environment. And so I realized that needed to be a topic that we discussed. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm so happy that you're here. I wanted to, before we began, just let you know about some of the things we have coming up at the farm. In March, I'm teaching a licensed ICRT level 1 and 2 master, an ICRT animal Reiki level 1 and 2 and master class, all in the Australian time zone. And what that means, or it's an Australian friendly time. And what that means for us in North America is that it's over an additional day. So instead of a 2-day class, it's a 3-day class. Instead of 3 days, it's 4. And it's in the evenings in North America. So if that works for you, I would just love to have you join us, whether you are in Asia or Australia or right here in North America. It seems to work for a lot of people. So we get a lovely mix of people in those classes. But it's something that I do to support my Australian students. I also have my first, since COVID, in person. It's an in-person and online class coming up in May. So if you'd like to visit the farm and work with us here in May, I have licensed classes, level 1 and 2, master, animal Reiki level 1 and 2, and master, and also Karuna Reiki Master, and in June, an animal communication class. And these are all hybrid classes in May and in June here at the farm in the Atlantic time zone. Please join us if any of those classes work for you. I also, before we begin, have a big announcement, and it's an announcement that affects this podcast. So I am so excited to report that the Reiki Business book I have been working on when I was in England, and just during COVID, as flights were canceled and there was chaos all around me in the Heathrow airport. I had just finished teaching a Reiki class there. And I really realized how many people needed Reiki. And I got a spiritual nudge that with my MBA and my business background, and yet I still had a reluctance to bring business principles into my Reiki practice. But a Reiki business is one of the best ways that we can share the beauty and the grace and the magic of Reiki with others. In fact, so much so, that's how Usui Sensei originally began sharing it with people, was through a business. His Gakkai, his school, was a business. Hayashi shared it through a Reiki business, and so did Mrs. Takata. I got the message that it was really important for people to let go of any reluctance that we had to start a business. And also, many people don't really know where to begin. They know what Reiki has done for their lives and they want to share it with others, but where do you even begin when you're starting a Reiki business? And so the Reiki Business book sets this out, and it's 9 chapters at the moment. That may change, but some of the chapters are a bit long. It still has to go through final editing, and I'm hoping to launch that this spring. And while I don't have a date for that yet, it is my hope that by the time we get through the podcasts about the book over the next 10 weeks, the book, we will definitely have a date, and the book may be ready to be purchased shortly after that. The announcement is that this book is nearing completion in its draft form. It still has a bit more work to do, but I've lined up some of our licensed Reiki master teachers. And those of you who've listened to a previous podcast know that in order to become a licensed Reiki master teacher like I am, and there's only 40 of us at the moment in the world, we have to do an additional 1,000+ hours of training, screening, testing, teaching with our mentor, and this sort of thing in order to become a licensed Reiki master teacher. And that's just to ensure the quality of your classes. and the quality of the training that you will get from a licensed teacher. But the fact is that by the time we become a licensed teacher, most of us have been teaching for 10 or more years. Most of us have a lot of experience with Reiki, and we've seen and done a lot. So I've lined up a bunch of these wonderful, brilliant, intelligent, experienced teachers to talk with you about each and every chapter in the book. Next week's podcast will be talking about chapter 1, which is about designing the Reiki business that's right for you. Now, this is for Reiki level 1 and 2 practitioners, as well as Reiki masters. And I'd encourage you to listen to it, even if you're not ready to start your business yet, because there are some fantastic things that you can bring into your own practice that will come to light. We will be doing meditations, and I'll be talking about some of the things that we cover in each chapter of the book, and we'll be going chapter by chapter through the book so that by the time it comes out, you'll be very familiar with what you will find there in the book. And you'll have an opportunity to experience meditations, healing meditations in each section. So even if a Reiki business is not in store for you right now, please go ahead and listen to the podcast anyway. You might be surprised. I myself never intended to start a Reiki business. I intended to just work with animals that I was working with already as part of my horse training business, and that was it. I also never intended to teach. So it's incredible what Reiki sometimes has in store for us. So I invite you to look for that. I will be talking about creating a business that's right for you. So many people think that a Reiki business means doing sessions and teaching. Reiki can be incorporated into every aspect of our lives. I have a client who is a lawyer who has incorporated Reiki into her law practice. Client who's an artist who continues doing what she does, but she's now incorporating Reiki into her art. There are so many ways. I have clients that are counselors who incorporate Reiki into the work that they are passionate about and that they're already doing. So there are so many ways that this book and these concepts can help you incorporate Reiki into your daily life and into what you're already doing and what you love doing. So I hope that you will join us. Now, getting back to climate change and the environment, these are things that have long been very dear to me, very close to my heart. I don't know about you, but I've always felt very close to the earth and to Mother Nature. In fact, even as a teenager, the first thing I wanted to do when I got home from school was go out, grab my horse, and we went exploring the woods together every single day after school. And even now, I find that if I can't get out in nature and get out in the woods every day, that there's something missing. It really grounds me no matter where I am in the world. Sometimes I can't get out in nature. I need to make do in a city or that type of environment, but I always need to get out and breathe the air, spend time with the trees. That's what really grounds me. And some of you have heard me talk about the fact that I do Reiki walks. I activate my Reiki symbols every morning, and I take a walk with the dogs, and with Reiki moving through me and around me. I leave Reiki trails where my feet, and this has become something that my husband and I do every day, or sometimes he has to go to work early, but most days I do it every day. And it's during these Reiki walks in nature that some of my best inspiration comes to me. This is where I'm told you need to do a podcast about the environment. You need to write a book, this sort of thing. And so I tend to follow those nudges, but this is where I communicate with the Reiki energy, with Source. And so the environment's always been really important to me. And as such, for instance, I have been very reluctant to use technology, and I romanticize the natural world sometimes and think, oh, gee, isn't that terrible that we're putting power lines in a certain place? And so I'd like to share with you a few messages that have come in both through me and through my teacher, my mentor, Colleen Benelli. Colleen says she was doing that as well one day. She was traveling home and she noticed the great big power lines, the big ones that look like they have arms out, and they were going across what had been quite a pristine landscape. And in her mind, she thought, oh, don't they look terrible? And what she did was she was also meditating, working with Reiki, listening to Reiki as she drove. And she heard the earth say, aren't they beautiful? She was surprised by that. And the energy of the earth said, these power lines are bringing electricity to people so that they can have light and heat easily, so that they can use this to have hot water and to wash their dishes and do things like this. And so she realized that the earth didn't judge, that the earth wants us to have so much beauty and grace. And so it really caused her, and then as well me, to rethink things. I have often said, oh, urban sprawl in cities, isn't that awful? And the earth showed me, no, it can be beautiful. The earth showed me there can be homes that keep people safe, that protect them from the elements, and that this can be beautiful. And so I realized that so much of what I was doing when I looked at the environment, I was judging. In another meditation that Colleen had with the earth, one day she was meditating with the earth and she said, what must you think of us? And I believe she was expecting the earth to say, you're terrible, you're polluting, you're doing all of this awful stuff. And in fact, the earth said, you're beautiful. And if only you humans could see yourself the way that I see you, you would create from a place of beauty. But because you believe yourselves to be flawed, because you believe yourselves to be destructive, that is where you create your life from. I wish you could see your beauty. And that became the basis. That became one of the core messages that the animals wanted us to see when Colleen and Sue and Robin and I sat down to listen to the energy and put together the ICRT Animal Reiki class. So that class winds up being beautiful and healing as we learn to accept our beauty. But I'd really like to invite all of you to accept that today, that you're beautiful and that technology can be helpful. So many times and so much there is human hating that happens in the world. Aren't humans awful? Aren't they doing terrible things? I used to believe that myself. Now I believe every human to be beautiful. And in a subsequent meditation that I had with Reiki and with Source, I was told that the solution to all the world's problems exist. So if we could focus on the solution instead of the problem, if we put energy into the solutions, rather than getting so wrapped up and caught in the drama of the problems, acknowledge the problems, and then begin working and putting effort toward the solution, all of the solutions exist. And I was shown that some of the young people coming up are not going to accept the world the way that many of us have just accepted it. And that's a good thing. The way that the young people do things is amazing. And yet at the same time, when I had this conversation with my daughter, and I said, I believe your generation has the solutions with climate change, with regards to climate change and all of that. She said, Mom, that's a lot of pressure to put on us. And she said, I don't know if you realize how much pressure our generation feels to fix something that we had no part in. And I realized from that discussion that this is something we can't put off. We can't say the next generations will fix this. This is something that each and every one of us has to work on right now. And yet the message that I kept getting over the holidays, everywhere I turned, there was a message about the environment. And so I realized I needed to create a podcast about this and talk to all of you with some of the messages that I was receiving. What's funny is I attempted to do that in my Reiki share recently, my January Reiki share. And although I had not had computer problems up until then, and I haven't had computer problems since, on the day that I wanted to share this with you in a Reiki share and record it, turning it into a podcast, I had such significant computer issues. I kept getting kicked out of the Zoom meeting and so on, that I wasn't able to record this until now. What's interesting is one of my students said, wow, Pam, do you think usually when things like that happen to me, there's a lower frequency or there are lower frequency vibrations that don't want the message to get out? And she said that it felt like that to her, that there were some energies that this was a very important message. And maybe that's why it was continually interrupted. And I think maybe it is. One of the things that happened is that I read a wonderful book that my daughter told me about. And it's, now I can't think of what it's called, but it is right here with me, called The Future We Choose. And this is the Stubborn Optimist's Guide to Climate Crisis. And I think that I'd like to share some of her core messages with you. But one of the big things that stood out to me was the need to change the narrative. So often when we think about climate change, and this was actually a book my daughter recommended to me, so often when we think about the environment, pollution, climate change, even the economy that is completely tied to fossil fuels at the moment, it all seems impossible. And sometimes we think if there are huge countries that are not going to change the way they do things, what's it going to matter if I recycle? What are my actions going to? They're a drop in the bucket compared to what's happening. And so very often when we think about climate change, we become paralyzed with fear, or we believe the situation to be hopeless, or that we can't make a difference. The message that I kept hearing Reiki give me, and the insistence that I get it out to you, is that this is duality. And some of you who've listened to the podcast have heard me talk about duality, that every energy and every emotion comes from either a place of love or fear. And we're being tested, and we're being asked to let go of fear-based emotions. And I want to tell you that moving into a place of hopelessness with regards to the earth and climate change and our future, that is fear-based. So in the course of our conversation and our meditation today, what I hope we can do is move us all into a place of love so that we can take back our power, we can become empowered, and we can know that indeed we can make a difference, each and every one of us. And I think that down the road, when our children ask us, what did you do about climate change? I really believe we all want to be able to say, I did everything I could, regardless of how it turns out. But I also believe that this may turn out to be a crowning achievement from humanity. I believe that this has the possibility. I've seen the in the field of possibilities, and I believe that we have an opportunity to shine and to be brilliant in this time, so long as we don't stay focused in fear, so long as we can move into a place of love along with this. One of the examples that I didn't think about until I started putting together notes for this podcast is that when our classes moved online, I was excited because during COVID, it gave us a way to reach people. But I don't know that I realized all of the implications of that. The online classes are very strong. And William Rand worked really diligently with the energy to ensure that they would be, and that the attunements were very strong. And I was excited at the accessibility that even though we were in lockdown, clients could still get Reiki when they needed it the most, because people were frightened, people needed to move forward in some way. And so the classes provided that. Now that I've had an opportunity to teach online classes for over a year, I love them. It's so magical to be together with people from all different countries and all different parts of the world. But also, it really saves our clients a lot of time and money. They no longer have to travel to us. They no longer have to get hotels and rental cars and get to class and this sort of thing. They're able to attend the classes in the comfort of their own homes. And that's a significant savings. So that's opened up and allowed a lot more people to learn Reiki, to take Reiki classes than would have been able to previously. So that's been a beautiful aspect of teaching online. But when I sat down to write the notes for this podcast, I also realized that it really reduced the environmental footprint of our Reiki classes. So not only do the online classes allow our students to experience something beautiful and to bring that beauty and that magic into their own daily lives in a permanent way, because once you've studied Reiki, you always have the Reiki with you as long as you want it to be, but it also does so in a way that has a much lower environmental footprint. So I realized that there is progress being made, people being able to work from home. Like COVID has actually, I was told early on in COVID that it was an opportunity for people to examine their priorities. And if they were not living their lives according to their priorities, to have a reset so that they could be living their life according to their priorities. And I was also told that that COVID was going to have an impact on the environment. And that made no sense to me. This message that I received from the energy, I thought, how can a virus have an impact on the environment? And yet I believe it has, by the fact that so many of us have been able to go online and we no longer have to travel to the same extent that we used to have to travel. I can call my doctor now and have a doctor's appointment on the telephone. That is incredible to me. All the time that I used to spend in waiting rooms with unhealthy people, often all around me, the travel, the parking, the fact that my doctor now calls me. I had a call from a cardiologist the other day, a specialist, and in 15 minutes, we resolved the questions and it was done. I can't believe the way that the world is moving. And I think that there has been so much positive that has come from all of this. One of the things that I've been able to do recently, I've always been, as an agricultural scientist and agrologist, I've always been very conscious of where our food comes from. And I'm also a gardener. I've also raised animals. I've raised chickens and I raise horses. And my grandfather was a dairy farmer. So and had pigs and all of this. So I've been around animals all my life and farming. And I realize the tremendous amount of effort that goes into producing food. So I've always been very diligent about ensuring that there is no food waste in our family. And I've always composted. And I wrote letters in my 20s. As soon as I got back from university and moved home to New Brunswick, I began writing letters to the Department of the Environment asking for better recycling programs. And when we couldn't get decent recycling programs in New Brunswick, I found a place that collected bottles that if I separated all of my things, I could take them there. And so at least I could recycle. And I did that until they stopped doing it. And eventually we did get a recycling program here. So I've always been really interested in trying to push the envelope. And yet recently, and I've always composted and maybe been a little bit ahead of my time. So this has always interested me. But recently, through the abundance of animal Reiki, I've been able to do a lot more. Recently, I taught my first animal Reiki masterclass. It was a pilot class. We needed to teach a pilot class in order to see how it worked and before we could release the classes to the ICR, give the classes to the ICRT for their consideration. And there was a lot of interest in my pilot class. I only offered it to the students I had already taught Animal Reiki 1 and 2 to. And at first, I only offered it to the first classes. And when I still had 2 spots, I wanted to have 12 people in my class. That was the limit of what I felt I could comfortably teach, because I often teach classes around that size. And for my first class, I didn't want to go beyond that. So I set the limit. And when I still had 2 spots left, I offered the class to a couple of more, to the rest of my classes, to the people that I had already taught level 1 and 2 to. And before I knew it, I had 20 people signed up for the class. I had made a mistake when I set the limit in my system, and it allowed people to continue signing up. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I wrote a letter to people and I looked at the names on the list, and they were all beautiful people that I wanted to teach. And I didn't want to have to tell someone, what, you signed up 5 minutes after somebody else. So I'm sorry, you can't come to class. And I looked at my schedule, whether I could create a second class, and I did not have the space in my schedule to do that. And the energy kept telling me, you can teach this class. You can teach 18. And so I fixed the error so that nobody else could sign up, and let people know that the class was full. And then I sent a message out to the 20 people. And I said, look, guys, this is going to be a big class. Karen Keg was in the class with me, and she graciously agreed to help me by, when it was time to share from our experiences, she took half the group and I took the other half. The energy showed me that to ask her that was a solution and that the class would work out fine. But I let people know it is going to be a large class, plus it's my first time teaching it. If you would rather, I gave them the other dates that I would be teaching throughout the year and said, it's no problem though, if you want to stay. But if you would rather, here's the other dates. And there's no guarantee there'll be a smaller class, but that's what we did. 2 people actually had some family emergencies and some household emergencies come up, so they couldn't join us. But 18 people, which is what the energy told me all along, joined the class. It went beautifully. And just before the class began, I got a message from the energy that said, you've always wanted solar panels and you've never had the money to do it, this will give you the down payment on the solar panels. Now, in the meantime, so I listened. I have a friend, Carl Divenborden, who has a fantastic newsletter that comes out every few weeks about the environment, just helping us think about different things. And I'll see if I can put a link to that in this in case any of you would like to get his newsletter as well. Carl was ahead of his time. He worked with Al Gore years ago, and does speaking engagements. He's been all over the world speaking on behalf of the environment and the climate change and things that we can do. So I didn't know how to go about. I knew we wanted to be more sustainable in addition to the solar energy, and I didn't know how to go about it. So I hired him. There's a program that allowed me to hire him as a consultant that paid part of the fee. And I hired him, and he examined what we were doing here and recommended solar panels, which is what I was hoping for. And we talked about other opportunities and different ways that we could reduce our impact on the environment here. And I'm happy to say that in October of this year, our solar panels went live. And the panel system that we have doesn't cover our entire needs, so we are still tied to the grid. I like to think that these podcasts and my classes are powered by solar electricity now, and so they have an even smaller impact on the environment, and that makes me feel so wonderful. And in fact, the energy showed me that I was receiving this abundance so that I could do something that in turn gives back to the earth, and it showed me this beautiful cycle that was able to happen as a result of that. And so that's really exciting. Carl also talked to me. I've always driven a pickup truck because on the farm I've had to haul horses around. But now that the children are older and we're not heading to endurance rides and and horse shows and the things that we used to go to, we don't have a 4-H club anymore. I haven't really traveled with the horses for quite a while. So my husband was after me to sell the horse trailer. It had been sitting there for 3 years. So I moved it along to a lovely couple who are traveling with their horse, and they were really excited to get it. And I've been wanting to get an electric vehicle. And I'm happy to say that on the winter solstice, on the summer solstice, we invested in the solar panels. And on the winter solstice, I was actually, on that day exactly, I was able to go in and order a plug-in hybrid vehicle that should be able to do most of my travel with electricity and electricity coming from the solar panels. So I'm really excited. There's been so much happen. Carl couldn't believe it. As soon as I contacted him and he began working for me, he said, "Holy cow, Pam, they just put in a new program federally for solar energy. You are so lucky." And I was. And in fact, we qualified for both a provincial, which is for our American friends, it's like your state. We qualified for both a provincial program and a federal program. And the price of solar panels has gone down so much that if you have a south-facing roof, seriously, it is affordable now. If you have a south-facing roof, we didn't, so we have to put a little more money into our panels. They're out in the horse pasture. But if you have a south-facing roof, go ahead and look into whether your state or your province or your federally, wherever you are, go ahead and look and see whether your region and your country has a program. Because the fact of the matter is that the author of this book, Christiana Figueres, was part of the Paris Accord, which said there was no way they were going to get agreement among all of the countries to make climate change concessions and improvements. And they did. She was successful in that. And so there are a lot of programs out there. If this is something that's of interest to you, go ahead and check it out. And then a few weeks later, or as Carl was still putting everything together for me, he said, "You must be the luckiest person on the earth. They just put in a provincial. There was already a federal program toward getting a hybrid or electric vehicle, but they added a provincial one. I was able to qualify for those as well and save $5,000 from my hybrid vehicle. And if I had gone all electric, I would have saved $10,000. But unfortunately, I do have to make some long trips every once in a while in the course of my work. And I also need to have the ability to haul a small trailer if I have to haul hay or anything like that. So I did need the hybrid this time around, but go ahead and check that out too, if that's something that you're looking at. They're making huge changes in battery, the distance that battery can go. There's a lot happening with electric vehicles right now. So go ahead and check out the programs in your region. And I'd like to invite you to think, I know we're not done. I know that even though we make an effort here on the farm, that there's still, a lot more that we can do. Those are just the recent steps that we've taken, but I'm going to keep looking at different things that we can do. And in fact, some of the encouragement came from a rather unlikely source. My husband and my son and I enjoy the program Yellowstone. Love it or hate it. It is interesting and full of drama. And I prefer my drama on the screen rather than in my real life these days. But I really feel Reiki brought these programs forward, and I really feel that it brought these messages forward. And one of the messages, when one of the protesters wound up in jail, he said, "Look, if you want to make an impact on the environment, run for office or vote for somebody who is following your ideals. Don't vote with your purchases." And he just basically said that we can be empowered. We can make a huge impact. And I really encourage you to think about that too. So I'd just like you to ask you right now, what do you want to do? Is there something that you have wanted to do that would have an impact on the environment or climate change? The litigator in that case even said, run for office yourself. And that's a possibility. But what do you want to do? And then think for a minute about what can you do? And I'd like to run through 10 things that she suggested in the future you choose, just to get the creative juices flowing for you. And then we'll move into a meditation, activating Reiki and allowing it to help us choose. So just right now, if you could, go ahead and bring your hands into Gasho. And if you have Reiki symbols, bring them in, activating your Reiki energy. And just inviting the Reiki energy to guide us, to release us from the energy of fear and move us into the energy of love. Christina Figueres said, we can no longer afford the indulgence of feeling powerless. So if you have ever felt powerless in the face of this issue, I just invite you to release the feeling of powerless now. Breathe. And then go ahead and place your Reiki activated hands on your body, listening with Reiki as we go down through some of these possibilities. And certainly we're not limited to them, but they may get your creative juices flowing. And these are 10 actions that Christina suggested in her book. And I will put the title of the book in the link of the podcast if you want to check it out after. The first thing she says is honor the past and then let it go. Let go of the way we have done things. Let go of the diet that we have been using the fossil fuels, let go of everything that isn't in the best interest of the earth, letting go of the old world, and instead focus on where we're going rather than where we've been. The second thing she says is that we probably will have grief over letting go of a way of doing things, a way of being. As much as I am so excited to get my new vehicle, I did love that old pickup truck. I will mind letting it go. It brought us to a lot of wonderful places. It allowed the horses and the children and I to meet wonderful people. We have a history, but I'll face my grief, and I've got a vision of the future. And it's really important to identify why do you want to do your part? Why is it important to you? Is it important because you want to leave the world different for your children? Is it important because you want to have that sense of doing something positive for the environment? Is it important because of your love of the earth? Why is this important to you? You don't have to believe that you can make an impact, that you can turn things around. You only have to understand that you want to, and to be in contact with why you want to. In fact, Maya Angelou says that you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. And it's important for us to remember that. The third thing that Christiana recommends is defend the truth. Keep your perspectives open and don't get hooked on an ideology. The fourth thing she invites us to do is to see ourselves as a citizen, not a consumer. Consumerism, we have long believed, was the definition of a good life, but we've discovered that in fact it's not. We often feel, if I can just have this, I'll be happy, this next thing. And we've discovered that has not been true. So let go of this idealism around consumerism. Dematerialize. She recommends that we let go of things that no longer serve us and allow them to go to somebody who needs them. And to become a better consumer, a more considerate consumer, someone who supports local produce and items, and who only purchases the things that we really need. The fifth thing she recommends is that we go beyond fossil fuels. Globally, the government spends $600 billion per year in order to keep the price of fossil fuels artificially low, is what she says. And I didn't realize that. So and that's 3 times what they are currently using to subsidize renewable resources. So there are several things you can do. We can look at our investments. And I have a meeting planned with my investment advisor to say I don't want to support the fossil fuel industry in my investments anymore, even though many investments, I contacted her 2 years ago to have that same conversation. And my bank didn't have any other options for me. They said, I told her I wanted to invest in renewable resources. And she said, we don't invest in that. That's irresponsible. And I think, though, that so many people have said, have called with the same concerns that I have, that I've noticed that they now have options where I can shift my investments toward renewable resources and towards the things that I believe in. If you have investments, that's something that you could do too. You could also have a look at your vehicle, possibly changing that out. And she recommends that we stand up for renewable energy, that we ask our power company to be using renewable resources, that we ask our governments to do that as well. Our power company, you can spend a few cents extra to ensure per kilowatt hour to ensure that your power comes from a new renewable resource. And as more and more of us do this, the message will get there and the attitude will shift and change. The sixth thing she asks us to do is to reforest the earth, literally to plant a tree or as many trees as you're able. This actually has been shown to reverse the process that has led to climate change. And I saw some research a few years ago from a scientist who recommended, and he actually had a number. He said, if we plant this many million trees, we have an opportunity to reverse what we have done. And he also followed his research, his science up with with examining whether we had the room on the earth to plant that many trees. And he discovered that indeed we did. So the question is, can you plant a tree? Is there anywhere that you could plant a tree, or could you plant 10 or 20? I've been walking throughout our woodlot. We have some acreage here, and we have some areas where the fir trees have died. And so we are working at removing those and planting oaks and maples and spruce and trees that have a better opportunity of surviving in our environment. This is funny. Zoom just quit on me again as I was talking about planting trees. So I feel that must be really important. But did you realize that trees cool cities by up to 50 degrees Fahrenheit? And so even if you live in a city, maybe there's something that you can do to support the creation of green spaces and of planting trees within your cities. They call it rewilding, letting nature flourish, and it's been shown to have beautiful results within many cities of the earth. So go ahead and consider that, letting nature flourish. Another thing that she recommends is going plant-based or eating less meat and dairy, just to decrease our carbon footprint. I don't think that there are any calls for extremes, but if you could eat less, it would have an impact on our footprint. So maybe that's something that resonates with you and that you'd like to consider. The seventh thing that she recommends is investing in a clean economy, to stop investing in companies that contribute to climate change, and that we can do that with our pensions and with our investments. The eighth thing she recommends is using technology responsibly, that can be good with technology as well as bad. And it's just all about managing it properly. AI, for instance, can take thousands of years of human knowledge and improve on it in 40 days. So there is potential within artificial intelligence to accelerate the discovery of climate change solutions. And so maybe that's something that you can support or be a part of. Another thing that Christina mentions in her book is gender equality. The fact that, and there's a couple of books on the environment that I've read who have talked about the fact that when more women are involved in decision making, for some reason, there seems to be more of a longer term perspective that women tend to take, and also more interest in collaboration and in listening and in the environment. So she talked about how women have been and continue to be pioneers of innovative climate solutions within their communities, and seem to be instinctively good at deep listening at empathy and collective wisdom gathering, especially in times of transition. So if you are a woman who has been considering getting involved at all in this movement, I encourage you to consider whether that's right for you and maybe doing it. She asks women to consider running for public office or being more assertive about a deserved promotion at work, becoming a part of the team that creates the narrative. And she encourages men to support their female colleagues and partners, friends, and family members. There's a role for all of us in this. And finally, she asks us to engage in politics, to vote, to campaign, to support those who are fighting for our climate, for the earth, and to champion them and their ideas, rejecting the status quo. It is possible to create a new story and to believe in the possibility. And she encourages us all to be able to say, I did everything that was necessary, when our children and grandchildren ask, what did you do when faced with this crisis? She encourages us to remain hopeful, to be a hopeful visionary, to set our goals and make our plans, to reduce our impact, to notice the beauty in nature that's all around us, to challenge ourselves in our consumerism, to plant trees, to vote, and to recognize our accomplishments. Now, if any of that resonates with you, and even if some of it didn't, I thank you for listening. And I invite you to join us as we move into a meditation today. Go ahead and activate your Reiki energy, placing your hands comfortably on your body, and breathe. Breathing in the light of love and releasing any fear, frustration, or feelings of hopelessness that you may have felt or held in light of the environment and the climate change crisis. And just notice as the light of empowerment flows through you now, assisting you in releasing the fear-based emotions, the frustration, the anger. Christina talks about righteous anger, that there is anger that can lead us to hopelessness and despair. And there is anger that can fortify our positions, make us very determined. So go ahead and release the anger, even as you retain the determination to make a change. Understanding that every little thing matters, and so every tiny change that each of us makes in our lives has an impact and is multiplied, because every tiny change moves us toward changing the culture as a whole. And now we invite the Reiki energy to fill us with hope and to help us create a new story for ourselves, in our lives, and for the earth. And the light of possibility flows through us. And along with that, I invite you to believe in the possibility that we can make changes. We can create an earth that is aligned with our priorities, that we can live in beauty and peace and truth and harmony with our natural environment and all of the other creatures on the planet. And that we can begin to realize, release our fear of those creatures, appreciating the beauty of every bird, every fish, every invertebrate, every plant, every flower, every leaf, every tree. Appreciating the harmony in nature and inviting that harmony into our own body, mind, soul, spirit, into every part of ourselves. Inviting the harmony into our own lives, into our relationships, to our communities, and onto our planet. And as we recognize that it is possible to live in harmony, surrounded by and appreciating the beauty, let's begin to create a new story for you. We invite the Reiki energy to show us how you can reduce your impact. What are the things that resonate with you that you can do today that may make a difference? And we'll spend some time here. Will you plant a tree? Will you reduce your impact? Will you challenge your consumerism? Will you become active? Will you vote? Will you write letters and emails? Will you plant your own garden or support locally? Go ahead and invite the Reiki energy to show you what you can do in your daily life to start. Maybe you will devote yourself to conserving electricity, using less. Maybe you too will investigate whether you can afford an alternate form of electricity. Maybe you will challenge your investments. Maybe you will change your vehicle. Whatever you decide to do, whatever is right for you, we invite the Reiki energy to help us begin making a plan. We invite the energy to roll through us to continue working after this meditation is complete, to help us become a hopeful visionary, to help us to become visionary in our own lives, seeing all of the small and even large places where we can make an impact. And with each and everything that you do, each and every change that you bring into your life, we invite the Reiki energy to help you recognize your accomplishment. I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and I'd like to thank you for all the efforts you are already making on behalf of the environment and for those that you will continue to make. Thank you for the tremendous amount of love that you are spreading on the planet today, for being a Reiki visionary. Thank you for being you. Namaste and Amen. And I invite you to remember that even if you can't think of actions, we can always send Reiki. So let's spend a few moments now sending Reiki to the earth, to the climate, and to the people who can bring solutions to yourself for the solutions that you're bringing. If you have a Reiki grid, I invite you to put all of these in your Reiki grid so that we are all together sending Reiki to the earth, to the environment, to assist with climate change. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for all that you're doing for our earth, for the planet, for the people in your lives, for you. Namaste.